What is the correct way to call you? Sir Pratchett?
No. Oh. No, it would be Sir Terence or Sir Terry, but you don't really have to do that.
Your Highness?
No.
That's
the Queen
too much.
would get very angry about that. It really doesn't matter. I mean, I'm known as Terry Pratchett. The fact I'm knighted is more... I tend to use it to bully bureaucrats.
Yeah.
You know, because we have a lot of bullies in our government.
Yeah.
And they don't bully you too much if you think you know someone that can bully them back. So I'm very, very glad I've got it. I was very...
Yeah.
We could talk about it if you like, but it doesn't... you know, I don't expect everyone to call me Sir Terry unless you think it gives you a certain amount of tone.
Yeah.
I'll answer to whatever you say.
Yeah. I guess you are maybe the only knight from these days who made his own sword.
Oh, yeah, probably. Well, I met a lot of the others, and they were all very surprised.
So how did you do it? You are able with this craft to make your own sword?
Quite a lot of the making of the sword was not really craft. I had two very good helpers. One who knew a lot about iron ore, and another who was a master swordsmith. And I contacted both of these. And are you familiar with the term raving loony?
No.
Well, it means mad, but in the right way. True enthusiast. That's my term for that. I said to them, look, I want to make my own sword, actually starting from scratch, actually starting by actually digging up the iron ore.
And you knew where?
And they didn't say, that's stupid. They said, oh, good. Oh, that's great. Well done. And so a gentleman called Jake Keane walked me across some fields not too far away from where I lived and taught me to recognize the iron ore. There's a lot of iron ore around on this planet, and it's just a question of knowing what to look for. Yes, and we took about 80 kilos of iron ore out of this field, and the farmer was absolutely pleased because it gets in the way of the plough. And he showed me how to make the furnace, and that was like being a kid at school because we dug up our own clay out of my field and made the furnace and did all the other things that you had to do. You have to get the furnace to cook gently, and it has to smoulder. And you have to burn sheep droppings. Yes. Sheep droppings are very good because they're exactly the right... I don't know. Whatever it is, the magic is something in the sheep droppings, perhaps. We smashed up the iron ore into small pieces and got rid of all the stone. And a lot of what you're doing is stuff with a hammer, and it's boring, and you have to keep doing it. Yeah. And that was the case all the way up to getting out two quite large nice blooms of iron ore, and then hammering them into bar stock, which again is just making lumps of iron that look fairly neat. And all that is, you have to know what you're doing, but you don't have to be a genius to really understand it. But it was, and a large part of blacksmithing is also hitting something very, very hard at the right time with a big hammer. Skill is knowing exactly what time, how hard, and which hammer. And
how long?
And most of it, indeed, we were blacksmithing. And about halfway through that, he said, okay, now we've done this, now we're swordsmiths. Again, this was really the work of a master. What I was allowed to do was stand there and he'd say, I want you to hit this very hard until I tell you to stop. So, yes.
So you had the instrument.
Well, but so was he. I mean, we wouldn't have got it done so quickly. It took us about a week. And actually, by himself, I suspect he could have done it in much less time because he wasn't taking a tutor. What I wanted to do was make a sword that I could say that I had touched every part, everything about it. And that included lighting the fire. We made a wooden bow and used this as a fire bow, so you generate the fire.
See, the fire,
yeah. And even that is a quite an important skill.
And it's quite fascinating to go through this.
It is, that's the whole point. The journey is almost better than the destination.
Than the result.
Nevertheless, we had enough fire for a good short sword for a man of my size, and any Iron Age chieftain would have been very, very happy to have had it. And also we put into the mix, quite a large number of lumps of meteoric iron. And are you familiar with the term of mana?
Mana?
It means intrinsic magic. It means... holy water would have something like mana.
Yeah.
It has something about it. Or meteoric iron was always thought of with superstition, because it was iron from out of the sky. And so my sword has been christened. I am not a Christian, but I think a sword ought to be. And it's been christened Thunderbolt Iron.
That's nice. That's nice. Well, I see I will learn a lot of new expressions today. If you compare Discworld and our world, what is a better place to live?
In many respects, Discworld, but because, you can't get cable or anything like that. And there's no mobile phones. They're remarkably similar, which I think is the reason for the success of the series. You have the wizards and the witches and the trolls and the dwarves, but in the ambience of Discworld, they are the people you expect to see. You can't call them fantasy creatures because they live there. Yeah. Actually, the trolls at the moment in Ankh-Morpork, which is the main city, are really, coming into their own. And what they call the heavy dollar, the spend that trolls have, is really important in the economy. Yeah. But certainly there is a lady in Unseen Academicals, one of the more recent books, and she actually goes around selling cosmetics door to door to troll ladies who have entirely different demands when it comes to cosmetics. They like to grow lichen under their arms and things like that, because they're made out of stone. But it's so. In a sense, the world they live in is a mercantile world. People buy and sell. It's a real city with real problems and a real police force and real interracial difficulties. And so in a way, you can map our own concerns about the things that happen on Discworld.
Small kids often dream about some kind of fantasy or fairy tale land. Is Discworld something you dreamed about when you were a boy?
My great-grandfather, who I never met, was Irish, and he told my mother, when she was a girl, a lot of the old Irish stories. Yes. And I'm sure she swears, or she swore, she's now dead, I'm afraid, that she told me a lot of them when I was very small. I think, like me, my mother will always polish up a fact to make it shine a little brighter. Yeah. But I think she must have done, because I'm pretty certain that at least one idea I've had in Discworld has got a definite Irish feel to it. Yeah. I was blessed with having a mother who talked to me a lot. And she told me things, and she told me about the Greek myths. She was quite a slick lady, but she was very cheerful if she got me to sort of work, if you see what I mean. And my grandmother lived in London, and I visited her, and she told me about the London buses. Yeah. I was very impressed, so I said to my mother, actually, he should have run an Athens, because if he'd been a bus, he would have had Athens on the front. Yeah. And she was very pleased at that, because that's the kind of bent logic which has actually done me a lot of good for the rest of my life.
And the kids are asking these questions.
Oh, yeah,
I think you wrote a book about a small kid who is questioning the fairy tales.
Well, I mean, the first book in a series called, well, we call it the Tiffany Aching series.
Yes.
It's a little girl, and she's looked at the book of fairy stories, and she knows that there is, she's not blonde, and she's not beautiful, and she hasn't got black hair. Black hair would do, or red hair would do.
Yeah.
But she hasn't got the right hair to be a heroine. But she has got, but she's got mousy hair, so she decides that she's going to become a witch.
Yeah.
And she's very knowing. My books are, in fact, relentlessly logical, in a strange way, and so are my characters, by and large. And when a dreadful water monster tries to eat her little baby brother while he's playing by the stream, she marches him back home, gets a frying pan out of the kitchen, comes back, gives him a bag of sweets so he'll stay in one place, and when the water monster comes out again, hits it very hard with the frying pan. Which causes her to be noticed by certain powers, as it were. Yeah. That here is someone, she wasn't frightened, here was a monster, she wasn't frightened, and she just got in there and sorted it out. And throughout the whole of her series, in the latest book in the series, she is, by all intents and purposes, an adult, making that book rather a funny one in England, since it was both the #1 children's bestseller and the #1 adult bestseller at the same time.
That's unbelievable.
Well, it isn't when you think about fantasy. Fantasy is kind of a uni-age genre. You start off with the fairy tales, and we all know these, and then you sort of work up around the science fiction and things like that. All these things are a kind of fantasy. Nearly all fiction is a fantasy. Think of Agatha Christie. Why has no one ever arrested Hercule Poirot? Everywhere he goes, someone dies.
That's right.
Yeah, and we know that murders don't happen on, in a country house. Someone with an axe kills you in an alleyway. That's how it normally happens. You ask a copper. But fantasy of the romance. And certainly a fantasy of the Wild West, because the Wild West only lasted for a decade or two. But think of all the myths and all the cinema that's come from the Wild West.
That's true. Do you have a kind of evidence how old is your average reader?
My typical reader, which is not quite the same thing, would be a woman in her mid-30s who has probably, almost certainly, had a university education. Yeah. But at the other end of the spectrum, there are, without a shadow of a doubt, people in their 90s. The youngest was 7. And this was because her mother, this was in America, was reading a children's book of mine called The Amazing Morris and His Educated Rodents. And it was quite stiff for a children's book because characters you liked got killed and things, or at least got into serious danger. And the mother was really worried about this book, which she was reading to the child, and found the little girl tapped her on the knee and said, "Don't worry, Mum, it's all going to come out well." And it showed that the kid knew how the author had to work. That's one of the things about the children's book, is that you can drag the children through the darkness, but there must be light. There must be, at the end of the dark forest, there must actually be the light.
Something,
that we can put up with any amount of that. And of course the child knows that there is no way he's going to kill off anybody and tell me the story's ended.
How difficult is it to find a good name for a new character in a book?
Sometimes it just comes straight out of nowhere. Yeah. Sometimes you see it on the side of a lorry. I'm not kidding. You just see a strange name. But a lot of what people think of as are weird names in my books are real names. I said this once to an interviewer in California, and he said, "But all your characters have wacky names, don't they?" And I said, "I don't think so. I bet you I can find one of them in your local phone book."
Yeah, did you?
Yes, I found the name Weatherwax. I have a witch called Granny Weatherwax. Now, I must admit I was cheating. I was in California, and I knew that the man who trained the dog Lassie, you remember in the movies?
Yeah.
His name was Weatherwax. So I thought, I bet the family will be somewhere in the area.
That's good. Yeah.
But there's a whole family. There's a witch called Nanny Og, and there's a whole clan of Ogs up in Northumberland in England.
You were diagnosed with Alzheimer's disease. I would never guess for a second that you would have this diagnosis.
That's because the Alzheimer's I have is called posterior cortical atrophy. So the part of me that it affects is really to do with topology. Mm-hmm. When I say that, you know, here's the book, here's the glass, I can see all these. But put me in a revolving door and you'll see me...
confused?
Confused, yes. I'm okay if I can grab the thing and walk.
Yeah.
Could I fly to Australia without help? Yeah, easily, because I think... Even then, you know, it's... Small numbers tend to float. I can't read anymore, not in any real sense. Not all that bad, actually, because modern electronics magnifies type. So this is where the modern world is coming to my aid. And a lot of the books I do like, and often reread, are printed in a time when the print was larger and blacker and a very good font. And one of the things that was really bad for me are clock faces. The old nursery clock, you know, like that.
Yes.
That's fine. But these days, people don't do it like that. On a watch, they make it fiddly. And, you know, you cannot make out what the time is. And I cannot read a digital clock.
I see.
Because you look at a digital clock and you see the time. I see there's an oblong, and there's another oblong, and there's another oblong, and there's another... All right. Now, to you, that would be 5 o'clock. To me, that's oblongs.
That's strange.
There are all kinds of other things. You know, I do nearly all the things I've always done, but slower. You have to think where once upon a time something happened automatically.
Yeah. But doesn't it paradoxically bring new themes for your writing?
In some ways, yes. Some of the things associated with it are definitely... I mean, an author cannot prevent a large part of themselves showing up, usually under heavy disguise, in the books. I mean, I am personally very angry at the fact I have Alzheimer's, because the classic time to have Alzheimer's is round about 80 or 90 years old. And I actually got it, I was diagnosed in my very late 50s. And I was just angry, not exactly at anyone. So that's the trouble, you see, with not believing in God. You can't blame him for things. But the anger, anyway, I find is very useful. I mean, it gives you certain emotions which you can actually use when somebody needs that emotion. And it can drive the text most forcefully. Mind you, I'd much rather have not had the Alzheimer's.
Well, Mr. Pratchett, thank you very much for sharing your time with us.
Thank you.
And for sharing your experiences from both lives, from your artistic life and from your real life. And good luck.
Great to be here.
Thank you for coming.
And the privilege to be interviewed by such a knowing interviewer.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Dnes byl naším hostem na plavárně Sir Terry Pratchett.